blessing of the chief. In order so that you can get connected to the whole community, because again, with the context of Africa and more so the majority world, we don't live in isolation. It's not about individualism, it's about the community. And if you get access to a community, it must be through the chief. I remember when I did some ministry in Mozambique, and I took a team, I didn't make mention, that we slaughtered chicken because we thought, we bought our chicken and we slaughtered, and we said we're going to share with a team of 15 of us, and the chief of the community was very upset. Why? Because food was not given to him first. That showed this great disrespect. And now, in the context of the West, I paid for it, so I must eat. Don't worry about whoever is in charge. But in the African context, or the majority world, you've got to identify so that you can engage ministry effectively. We quickly learned, we apologized to the chief, and the following supper time, he got we asked him to dish himself so he could take the best of pieces. Again, why? Because it gave us access to the community, and because it granted us access, and because he affirmed us, the community gathered over 1,000 people, and we showed them the Jesus. That was my very first lessons about how sometimes our westernized approach to doing ministry can become an obstacle in terms of how we do ministry in the context of the environment that we might not be used to or understand. And so, what I want to do very quickly focus on today is, apart from roles which you can read, I think it's very self-explanatory. Kraft does a very good job on roles in society and how those roles function. And when you understand those roles, then you will understand how effective understanding those roles, the person in charge, is in order for you to gain entry into a particular community. Also, I want to enable us to understand that sometimes in the West, education is deemed absolutely important, and we feel that because majority world or Africa doesn't have the same westernized education, they are backward. This is my daughter. Why she comes? She knows about it. Amy, I'm busy in a lecture. All right, and so sorry about that, but so we need to understand the role of education, and there are many forms of education. Now, I can have multiple PhDs behind my name, but I can lack wisdom. Right. I've seen many persons who are educated, and they just can't make a simple, logical decision. So there is a difference between education and wisdom. And so many might not have the westernized notion of education, but they would have wisdom. Can I please take this?
You take it.
Time. I might have knowledge, but I might not know how to use that in time. That then doesn't demonstrate wisdom. And again, within the context of culture, education is how does the infant transform or grow by means of knowledge from infant into an adult. And there's notions of how do we educate this person as a child culturally, so that when he or she grows up, she affirms her cultural heritage. And generally, there are 3 ways in which a person learns. One, formally, what we're doing right now, sitting and learning through a lecture. Secondly, there's informal. Informal can be an induna, sitting on the tree, under the tree, and having a conversation. But in that conversation, teaching is, or learning is, taking place. And Christ, the way he taught was very informally. Or some would say, on a mountain, on a boat, but addressing crowds of people, teaching the kingdom of God. That is a form of non-formal education, but learning is taking place. And then there is this non-formal education where learning, again, through seminars, through conferences, where you're sitting in a kind of a professional space, but not in the form of a lecture, student context. So people learn differently, and most learning in the context of the majority of the world takes place, or should I say most of our learning takes place informally. You'll be surprised that most of your life's lessons are watching people do what they do. And so understand that a person might be educated, but not necessarily, might not have learned anything.
That's true.
So beware that when you approach someone who might not have the same amount of theological training as you, doesn't mean that he's not educated. He's just learned differently. Because again, the West has a notion that we are coming to you with knowledge, or we are coming to you with information, and we have it right, and therefore you learn from us. That's not true, and neither is it correct. Neither is the correct way of approaching, communicating the gospel, or teaching someone. Always acknowledge that persons have learned. And so, even when I teach you, I am not of the assumption, so I should say, I don't come with the assumption that you're clean slates in terms of knowledge. That's why I often facilitate the learning process rather than say, now follow my content. Because I understand that over the years you have gained knowledge, and my responsibility in this context is to ask how much have you learned, and how to move from what you have learned to what you must learn. Because everyone who sits here has some understanding of God. We are theologically informed, whether formally or informally, or even through non-formal. And part of non-formal theological training will take your preaching. Okay? In the context of the church, but there's non-formal training taking place. And so never assume that the person that you're presenting the gospel to is uneducated. Because too often now, I mean, sometimes remember, go back to our first lecture with perceptions. Because he might not speak like us, or he might not articulate as clearly as we do, we consider him to be uneducated. That's our perception. Because we have baggage that we carry and we project it onto
others.
That person. That because he doesn't speak or understand the way I do, then he's possibly uneducated. So beware of that, especially when you're communicating the gospel. Secondly, in the notion of education, again, I did make mention that there is a difference between education and wisdom. Know the difference. That sometimes when you sit with the elderly, they might not be educated, but they're full of wisdom. And what taught them that wisdom? It was life experiences. They never went to school, but they'll tell you how to manage your finances. You know, they never went to school, but they give you good counsel on how to manage relationships. Where that comes out of life, informal learning. They never went to school, but they'll teach you how to plant correctly and know when to plant, what to plant, when to plant. No degrees in farming, but they tell you how to raise livestock. Informal learning. So never ever underestimate when you communicate the gospel to someone that you can't communicate it to a person without knowledge, or that you bring something new to him. That's a form of arrogance on our part, and beware of that. And sometimes, as Westerns, when you communicate the gospel, we do that. Or actually, with the Western attitude, when you communicate the gospel to someone, we have this perception that they are dumb, we are enlightened. Beware of that. What I want to talk about now is the notion of family, and especially how do you communicate the gospel in what we consider a community that is family orientated. And we all are family oriented, but how the West understands family is very different from how the majority of the world understands family. Now, if you had to understand family in the Western world, what would the Western world concept of family?
Immediate family, mom, dad.
Immediate, what we call the nucleus, family, mother, father, child.
Yeah.
Right? But in Africa or in the majority of the world,
Community.
Everyone. Right? Family is the extended family. It's just not mother, father, and child. And so, in the context of understanding family, how then does marriage affect this construct? If you understand family to be the basic social unit, and marriage is an entrance into the family, it's important to understand how how these agencies work. Now, in the West, should I say, in majority world, marriage is entrance into the family. Okay, I don't marry to start a family. I marry to enter into a family. But in the West, I marry to start a family. Yeah. You can see differences, right? When I marry, I enter into the family, where majority world. But when in the West, I marry to start a family, and sometimes this family or this child of mine becomes an hindrance to my own goals, to my own career, and so I put off childbearing as long as possible because my goals are more important than childbearing. Whereas in the majority world, childbearing is important because there's certain economic factors that come with childbearing. So beware again how you, when you're talking with someone, how you understand the concept of family. Now let me say this, that the way we understand family in the West, and by understanding family in the West and projecting that understanding onto the majority world can be very disastrous. It can become a barrier in communicating the gospel. For example, in the context of the majority world, and even in the context of, when I speak of the majority world, I speak of the Asian world, I speak of the African world, that I cannot make growing up, I could not make a decision of asking Patricia for a hand in marriage until my family, my mom and my dad, approved it. And when they said yes, then I could say, Patricia, would you want to go? Otherwise, I'd kind of duck, and lay it in form. Patricia coming into the family, or by me marrying Patricia, I just couldn't say, just only ask Patricia, I need to ask her dad and the extended family, would you allow me the privilege of marrying your daughter? And so, in the context of my culture, and Neelan would know, that you take your whole family, not just your mother, your father, you take your grandmother, your grandfather, your uncle, your aunt, your extended family, but those who play a major role. Even your uncle, your eldest uncle, has a very important role because, in fact, he's late now, I used to call him Big Daddy, Big Father, right? But he was my uncle because of the role he played. And his voice is very important in the decision-making process. Now, in the West, they would say, but he's my uncle, he doesn't have any part to play in my life. In fact, the West will tell you, not even my father, I make the decision and I inform them about my decision that I'm going to marry this girl, or I'm going to propose, I'm going to marry this girl. In fact, for many Western contexts, the only time they see the girl is when the girl is married, or being married, or maybe at the engagement, right? But in the majority world, before you can make any decisions, the family needs to approve, and the voice of your uncle is very important. If he says no, you got to listen. I remember when I was elected a deacon, and I was 19, and my uncle was part of the church, and he stood up and said, this is my niece, I'm very proud of him, but he's too young. Now, in the West, we'll say, no, but I don't need to listen to my uncle. I said, no, Dad, I listen to you. I'll say, Big Daddy, I listen to you. I'll wait one more year, 20. But then you give reason and respect to that voice. You don't say he's my uncle, he never contributed to my life. In the extended family, every part of the family contributes. And if you're, as a Westerner, going with your mindset of a nucleus family into a context where the family is extended, and you say, no, don't listen to your mother, don't listen to your father, you accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, doesn't matter what they say, can be very disruptive to the family.
It's true.
And so how do you communicate the gospel so that it unifies the family rather than disrupts the family. And these calls for ingenious ways of doing ministry. Now, what are some of the advantages of an extended family? You see, because sometimes the West has this notion that that West is best in everything, that their understanding of family is best, their understanding of theology is best, and to a certain extent they even would mock brothers and sisters living together. Think of the Muslim world, I mean the Muslim families. Brothers and sisters will live together with their wives and the children, and they'll buy this multi-story house that extends the whole street. And they buy one house at a time, and you ask, where do they get all this money from? Well, just look at the household. You've got 5 salaries coming into one pot. Can you imagine what they do that one salary going just into one pot? That I buy when the house is purchased, I buy it with all of the income put together. And so over a period of time, we accumulate wealth. And so in the extended family, apart from just providing strength to the family corporately, it provides stability for marriage. Since marriage can be very insecure and unstable, and especially if you're getting started, coming into an established family where you know you've got a support system is very comforting. Can you imagine? It's a lot more easier for someone who comes into a family knowing that he or she, well, she generally has the support system of a extended family than going by yourself and starting all alone in your little flat, all by yourself, raising up this child all by yourself. What also the extended family provide are several mothers. So if one mother doesn't have the capacity to raise the child, you've got the aunties come in. So isn't that a beautiful thing? But the West would say, how can you actually live the way you do? I know, some of my Western colleagues couldn't understand why Indians lived. I mean, my father only left his home when I was 3 years of age and started his own home. Right through the time, he all of them brought the monies to the mum. The mum kept the money for them and used the money wisely so that everyone in the family benefited. And again, that's the same thing, create the sense of not only economic advantage, but there's always this psychological advantage as well, because you've got more than just one mother parenting the child. It takes a whole village to raise the child, a whole family to raise their child. Again, the extended family, there is a sense of economic advantage that everyone supports everyone. There's also just disadvantages. I mean, everyone gets involved in your business. But I'd rather have everyone involved in my business, and when tough time comes, everyone is supporting me in my business. And having this notion of I'm all by myself, and when I'm in pain, I suffer all by myself. There is solidarity in prosperity. There's also solidarity in suffering when you are with the extended family. And in the extended family, the man is authoritative. Most majority world, we are patriarchal, and so you find that when you wanting to question the authority of the man, you question the authority of culture, of society, and so some of the Western notions of the understanding of patriarchy is eroding family values. Now, I'm not saying patriarchy is good. The way it's been used has become abusive of a woman. But in the context of culture, the man is still the leader. If you want access into a community, you don't go to the wife, you go to the man. And if you want to lead a family to Christ, you don't lead it through the woman, you lead it to the man. In fact, it's stated that when a father gives his heart to the Lord, 90% of the time, the whole family follows. But if a mom gives her heart to the Lord, 90% of the time, 10%, one or two children might follow, but not the whole family. But when a father gives, or the head gives house to the Lord, his heart to the Lord, becomes a Christ follower, it's amazing the whole family follows through. And so there is great importance played in the leadership of a man in the majority world. So do not underestimate that. While we might have this notion of equality between men and women, and that's not a bad thing, But how that equality is manifested in the majority world can be very dysfunctional to the families, because sometimes it's almost demeaning the role of men in society. So much so some women will say we don't need men for our well-being. Now that is a direct contrast from what God intended for families to be. Now also we need to understand that in the African majority world, there is what we call security-orientated families, that the center is the child, the most vulnerable. And you've got the mother, almost this onion layer. You've got the father, then you've got the community, and you've got society as a whole. Each one protecting the most vulnerable. Whereas the Western notion of freedom-orientated, each person is to themselves. While there is some form of protection, but again, this protection is minimized. If it's something that is developing in African society, in African context now, where if you find someone that is hurt, that you don't assist. Prior to that, if someone was in pain, the community comes together, gathers around, and makes sure that person survives that particular ordeal. Now everyone takes out the camera and starts filming the person in their particular ordeal or suffering. That's again trying to adapt a freedom-oriented notion of family that has demoralizing effects on family in the majority world. I often tell you, most African homes suffer from what we call double consciousness. Who are we? The boys use this term, double consciousness. We think one way, we act another way, and we're almost confused because of how the faith or the gospel is presented to us, that you have to literally abandon everything cultural to follow Jesus, and in abandoning everything cultural, we took on ourselves another culture, a Western culture that might not be Christian, but we assimilated to being Christian, and therefore this tension that exists in our families, this tension that exists in society, this tension that exists as individuals as a whole. And so we understand that in the context of the majority world, families are layered. The child in the center, very vulnerable, protected by the mother, then protected by the father and society. However, apartheid destroyed that. Because again of the profitability of the West, for the profitability for the West. Prior to that, prior to 1948 and the Group Areas Act, the African poor man always stayed at home. He was a protector of the home. He might have sat and watched while his wife tilled the soil, but nonetheless, he provided protection over the family. And in order to survive, he had to leave his family and find work in the mines. That is a new phenomenon in African context, when you leave your family for the sake of work. Prior to that, you stayed with your family and you provided the first layer of protection.
So how then you sustain the family if you have to stay at home?
The field.
The field?
Yeah, most African households were agrarian.
Oh.
They farmed the land. But because you need cheap labor to make another society rich, you employed and you brought them from the home into the mines, and you separated child from father from child. And now it's become, in most African households it's a norm for the father to leave and to go work, the mother to leave, almost migrant workers, and then you leave your children with your grandparents. And that'll be fine because the extended family comes into place. That then the grandparent takes the responsibility, or the aunties or uncles will take the responsibility to take care of your children, because this is expected in the context of what we call security-oriented household or in the majority world. Any questions so far? I trust it's getting us to think differently about how we view family and what's the right family, there's no such thing as my family is right and your family. My understanding of family is right and your understanding of family is wrong. The West has a very nuclear family, a very small family. The family in the majority of the world is extended. You marry into a family in the African context or majority context, but in the West you marry to start a family, almost like you don't have other persons around you. And so when you communicate the gospel, keep that in mind. And so when I go into a community, when I go into a community, who must then become the house of peace, if I use that term, that you learned in church planting methodology. Who must become the house of peace?
We haven't done church planting.
You haven't done person?
No.
Okay.
Next year.
Urban evangelism? No. Okay, so Jesus says, go into take 2 by 2 into the city of Jerusalem and find the house of peace. And from there, proclaim the gospel. And in the community or in the family will be the house of peace. For me, for one, the house of peace will be the chief. You want to make sure that you secure peaceably with him so that you can use his home to proclaim the gospel. Secondly, it might be the father in the house. Okay, once you secure his camaraderie with you, you have free access to his family. If you go via him and speak to his wife and his children, you will not take lightly to that, just because how orientated, structured homes work. I'm protecting my wife, I'm protecting my child. In order for you to have access to them, you must come through me. So understand that. So whenever you go into an African household, ask where's your dad? Don't just speak to the child. Or you go to the wife and say, where's your husband? May I speak with him? And when you do that, you have access to the whole family. And unlike the West as well, we tend to disciple individually. In majority of the world, you disciple as a family. So if the father gives his heart to the Lord, then you don't take the children there and teach them and the wife there. You do it together as a family, because you're showing that this is what you would do as a culture. And these are some of the Christological implications I think we need to learn when we're doing gospel communications, which sometimes we speak about a personal conversation or personal evangelism. While that is good, again, it is a Western notion. Some countries in Africa, and more specifically, I think some countries in Nigeria, a person will not accept Christ unless his community says, yes, you may. And if the community says no, the person, he will not reject it, he will not do it immediately. Why? Because he doesn't see himself as an individual, but sees someone as part of a greater whole, and wants to be part of this affinity of family that comes together. We spoke about freedom-oriented societies. I said the central relationship is the relationship between the husband and wife, and the most important job of the husband and the wife is to work their relationship out. Again, without really any support from outside. Whereas our structure-oriented communities require the family to come to their aid. That is why there is an expectation that if I progress, especially in South Africa, if I progress in my job, I need to pay back. Because my progress is not just on me. The whole society, my whole family lifted me up. And as I go up, I need to lift others up with me. And in South Africa, we got a name for it. What is it called? Sorry. No, but there's a name that we black taxes, right?
Black tax.
Yeah, that's a negative connotation. Black tax.
If you made it, you need to look after the family.
Right, because you're making it. It's not just based on you. The other people will sacrifice so that you can move up. Especially, think of it if you were to leave your family, because your uncle took care of your kids. And because you didn't have the burden, of taking care of your kids, you had the freedom to complete your studies, get a good job. While he took care of your kids, you uplifted. So therefore, now that you're in a place of position, it's your responsibility to lift your family up. How do you lift your family up? By paying back. It's a negative term, black tax, and I think many times it was developed by Western mindset. I don't see the African person seeing that as black tax, but rather as his responsibility to his family. The Western said, well, I don't. Why must I
say that?
Sorry?
Nepotism. I'm saying the West would say it's nepotism.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not nepotism. It's how you see it, right? And that, for example, Zuma employing all of his friends or his family members, right? We said nepotism, but for him, that's my responsibility. I am here because of them, and my responsibility, and it's my now responsibility to make sure, as I am elevated, my family is elevated with me. And for Zuma, that is not wrong. And for most black culture, that would not be wrong. The West will say it's nepotism. The West will say, why must the family benefit from my hard work? But Zuma says, I'm here because of my family. I made the sacrifice they made so that I can be here. I now need to pay back. So it's again how you view things. You might see it as wrong, others might not see it as wrong. Let's say as practicing a cultural value system. Marriage again is another aspect of family. Now we know that if you have to define marriage, how would you define it? How would you define marriage?
It's an agreement between, like a Western mindset would be an agreement between you and your spouse and God.
Right, I mean, generally it is an agreement between two.
Yeah, between two parties, yeah.
Don't think that the West doesn't have, the East, I should say, majority don't have an agreement between one wife, one husband, many wives, and God, right? They still have the agreement. It's just that done differently. Yeah. But in the West, most of the marriages are monogamous. Yeah. Because we have been influenced by Greek culture. The African context, they have not been influenced by the Greek culture. Greek culture is one man, one woman. Again, it's biblical, but even in scripture we find we have one man, many wives. So you can't say that one man, one woman is.
It's one man, 12, one man. Even if they are many wives, but then between the two of us, it's me and you.
Right, exactly.
Don't mind the rest.
Don't mind, so one wife at a time.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is how we understand marriage as well. So is the concept of the Western understanding of marriage biblical to that of the African context? We need to understand that there are certain aspects to polygamy that might be beneficial to the community that we might not understand. So as a gospel partner going into a particular community, and more specifically a community that will allow for polygamous marriage, don't say you're sinning. Because polygamous marriage is allowed in scripture, not that the biblical principle was God created Adam and Eve, but Adam, I think, would have had many wives. And so we find scripture indicating that as well. But the ideal, God created one man, one woman. If Eve gave Adam such a headache, I can't imagine what 3 or 4 wives would do. They give their migraine.
Did she give Adam headache?
I don't know.
Did you actually give Adam headache?
I don't know. I'm just trying.
But it's from the fruit, the sugar.
Exactly.
The mere fact that they didn't say this woman.
Woman, exactly. Yeah. I'll quickly point out to her. And so what I'm saying is, we need to understand the concept. Marriage is an agreement or coming together between a natural man and a natural woman. In today's modern context, marriage is being redefined. And beware of how the concept of marriage is redefined, because by changing the definition of marriage, you change what marriage is. Again, the Bible is very clear that God is meant for man to be with a woman, not with another man.
Yeah.
No matter how much I can love that man, it is not God's intended way for marriage. And so you define marriage by saying it's between a man and woman, to say it's between partners, and the partner could be
that's what it
any
is.
one.
Yeah.
And so there are certain notions of marriage, and especially in the context of the majority world, we often say Africa is a polygamous society. Yes, but polygamous means that you have many partners in a marriage. However, polygamy is made up of two concepts. One is polygamy, which means one wife having many husbands. Oh, just no. One man having many wives, right? Which is polygamy, not polygamy, polygamy. And then you have polyandry, which is one wife having many husbands. Then you have polyamory, which is Western, that one partner can have multiple lovers.
Oh,
That's not African.
yes.
It is not majority, it is Western. That I can consent bringing multiple partners into my marriage, and that's what we call multiple lovers, without any marriage.
Open marriage.
Very much so, if you want to call it open marriage, right? And what are some of the reasons for polygamy in the majority world?
I feel discontent, maybe lack of satisfaction with one partner.
You know, that's a misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding. Large family.
Okay.
Tremendous misunderstanding, lack of that's giving a particular notion that black men are driven by sex. And that's a Western notion that needs to be deconstructed. That black men have a healthy sexual appetite, therefore they must have multiple women so they can satisfy. That's not so.
In the African context, they want to have a large family.
Why large family?
Well,
Because
Right, exactly. So remember, most majority world families would be agrarian. So you need many hands to till the soil, many hands to produce the goods, so that it can increase the wealth of the family. And how do you increase the wealth of the family? By having many wives, so you have many children. That's why the Muslim community is growing to the extent they are, because of that particular notion. I'm not saying it is right, but there are reasons why polygamous marriages are allowed. One, for economics, that it uplifts the family. Well, what's another reason?
I would say in the African culture, when the husband would travel away from home, you'd have a family in one province and a family in another province. For whatever reason. Maybe he's lonely because his family's away. So then you would have one family. Especially like in the Western Cape, you'll have one family in the Western Cape, and then in the Eastern Cape you'll have another.
Again, that's unfortunately a deconstruction of the majority world family. That's a reconstruction of apartheid.
Yes.
Yeah. Because of how the system was manipulated.
Yeah.
So another reason would be actually because of the wife.
Because you cannot get children.
Right, absolutely. She's barren, and you'll say, take another wife so that the legacy can continue. Okay, so you'll have, but that's on the permission of the first wife.
So what if I have already made enough children, mostly?
Sorry?
If I've already made the sufficient children, so I don't think that point is very valid.
No, so this is, you have sufficient children. So there's another reason. The third reason that you need help to raise those children. That you allow your husband to marry another wife, so that there's more assistance to take care of the household.
But there's a lot of contention when it comes to polygamy.
Sorry?
There's a lot of contention.
No, absolutely. I'm not saying there's no contention. There is many contentions. But what I'm saying is that these are reasons why polygamous marriages exist. And that when we judge from an outsider, they don't say polygamous marriages are inconsistent with scripture. There are reasons why polygamous marriages occur. We need to understand that. And the first reason why, as Moses said, that black men have a high sexual drive, they're sinful, therefore they must have multiple wives, and that's not
True, because Prof, where I'm coming from, our fathers had children. One man has got 62 kids,
Yeah.
and they go on. So that's why I answered that because the concept of many was maybe he has a hectares of farm, and
Right.
then so he takes the family, or he has
well.
that notion that if I am not here, this is what I will leave for them, which is a farm.
Right.
So where I'm coming from is you can't find 9, it's always 20, 50.
Yeah, because as I said, the more children you have,
The more children you have,
the-
so
the
and
more
also they
wealthy.
believe if they have many children, one dies, at least they can have.
you have another family, another child to carry on.
Yeah.
I mean, carry on the family legacy is very, very
But we
important.
suffer, Prof, we suffer.
I know, but what I'm saying, but it doesn't mean to say it is incorrect with the reasons for why
Yeah.
it has come to being.
Yeah.
Maybe now we see some of the faulty areas of polygamy, but when it was constructed, that's absolute. It was well intended.
Yeah.
Also, it gave the woman a reason for being. In African society, a married woman is a respected woman.
Yeah.
And so if no one wants to marry this particular person in the community and man says, not, I will give you respect by marrying you. Okay, so would you consider that evil or good?
Good.
I'll consider that good. I might not agree with the notion of polygamy, but what's happening to that lady? You're giving her identity, you're giving her purpose.
Yeah.
You're
And
giving
maybe,
up her well-being in society.
But that was then, Prof. That was then.
That was then, yeah.
And still now.
Now, ladies no longer value marriage.
Right, so so let me tell you this. A polygamous marriage, a man in a polygamous marriage tends to be more faithful in his marriage than a man who is now in a monogamous marriage. A polygamous marriage was more stable than at present. There's more divorces happening in Africa now based on one-on-one than happened then. Why is the family so deconstructed now in comparison to when it was then? So you've got to look at those notions, because again, this notion of I'm African, I have my heritage, but I'm adopting a Western culture, and that creates what we call tension. And how do we live in that tension?
I mean, maybe
And
the.
also, Prof, some women, they are saying that they would love to be part of a polygamous relationship, because now they know, because many women now, they're not married, they're single.
Single?
Yes, and they've got babies.
Single mamas.
Yeah, because again, we'll come to why women are single. Again, it is, African men were taking responsibility over that. But because of apartheid, and more so specifically in South Africa, the apartheid created a different perspective of what a man must be. Polygamy showed his manhood that I had many wives, and showed his stature in society. Now that is contextualized. If I have many girlfriends, it's showing my masculinity. That's not polygamy. That's just adultery. There's a difference, right? Between having many girlfriends and having many wives, because the husband has responsibility over his children, over his wife, rather than someone who has many girlfriends and indicating that I'm the dog because I have 50 girlfriends. And so the fourth reason I didn't make mention that for polygamy is that there's an expectation that with many children there's increased work, and so you have someone to assist, and then someone said the compensate for the parents in the life of the child. 5 reasons: economic reasons. One, that the first wife will request help to administrate the family. One is to provide opportunities for every woman to marry, thus fulfilling a role in society. And number 4 is for desire to have many children. One, so that the workforce can increase, ultimately uplifting the wealth of the family. The last one is again to make sure that if any of the wives or the first wife is barren, and by taking a second wife, your legacy carries
Sorry, Prof, I want to understand. Won't you say something that women want to be part of what? What did you say now?
No, I'm saying that there is women nowadays who are willing to be
to go into a polygamous marriage because of the security it offers.
Yes.
Yeah. might I also say that, you know, this notion that what's happening right now, again, the blesser, and you know, I'm the blesser as well. I have many girlfriends because I bless all of them. And some of our young girls are okay with that because they're getting a form of income
Sugar
without
daddy.
the sugar daddy, without the sugar daddy being
They call it
responsible.
blesser.
Blesser, yeah. And then that's, I mean,
You must not lay your hands on the lady's head. You become
yeah, so,
a blesser.
you know, that's not African.
No, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not.
That's a new phenomenon.
I'm just hearing that now.
Sorry?
I'm just hearing that now.
You don't know blesser? Okay.
That's
But
a new
they
phenomenon.
refer to themselves as sugar babies now.
Sugar babies, sugar daddies. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But the sugar daddy is the blesser. He bless many girls. And blessing, give them proper housing, proper lifestyle is, and it's generally a rich person.
Literal monthly allowances.
Yeah. And so certain girls will find that okay, but it's not right. It's not part of African culture.
Prof, I just wanted to share, just to add on what you've said, in terms of what you just mentioning about blessing and so on and so forth. I had the case of a girl that was 18, a black South African that was engaged to a man who was about 67, is in Dubai.
Yeah.
It was the time that Uber started. The guy came down to South Africa and bought it for that girl, 30 cars for Uber.
Yeah.
And then in return, he said to her, I don't like how your boobs looks, excuse me for the word. She went to do the boobs, and then afterward, it created problems for her. And the guy had about 6 kids. And then later on, the guy left the girl, and the girl today, she's got cancer because I think when they went to take it out, something happened there, and the guy is nowhere to be seen. So I think that in Africa, even though whatever is happening in our countries, we still have holding on to moral values more than
Yeah, we must hold on to a moral value.
we have to.
And it's important. And sometimes moral values have more in polygamous marriage than in a Western concept of marriage. Now, also spouse selection. The West will say, but why are you involving your own family in the selection of a spouse? You know, again, the West looks down upon arranged marriages. You know, that happens in Asia. You know, that you never see a bride until the day you get married. Most Asian older men would have not fallen in love. They would grown to love.
Even with cousins, Prof.
Yeah. Okay. I rather grow to love someone than fall in love, because the moment I fall in love, I can fall out of love, just as quick. But when I marry, and this is the West doesn't speak about, they glamorize the notion of love relationships. But the thing is, love is just a feeling, and so many times
It vacillates.
right, you know, it vacillates between how I feel and therefore how I enact that love to. If I feel bad, I don't love. And if I feel good, I love. But the notion of love is whether I feel good or the biblical notion of love, whether I feel good or bad, I still have to love, because it's an act of the will. And so, because it's based on the Western notion, love is based on a feeling, therefore divorce is so
Rampant.
It's true. Today I marry you, tomorrow I feel incompetent, and we are diametrically opposed, so I can just divorce you on average. And the sad reality is that 50%, the divorce amongst Christians are more than divorce amongst non-Christians.
Definitely, Prof. Definitely.
And if we have the truth, why are we in such turbulence?
Because a lot of them get forced to get married. Say if they have intercourse before they're married and a child comes, and they're forced to get married.
No, but that's not that's marginal context of the South African context. Most Western will fall into marriage, fall in love, and they'll fall out of love. Now the arranged marriage is this: that your parents or your family will look for someone that's compatible to you in terms of education, in terms of your social standing, in terms of the family. It can become manipulative, but however, sometimes if a person comes with a particular social and financial standing, then that person cannot be manipulated. And someone who comes with nothing, the husband say, you have nothing, you are here because of me, and that can be a form of abuse. However, in arranged marriages, the family will either call on someone or will send a family member to look out for a person, and or even sometimes knowing that the families grow up together. So one father will say to the other father, I think children grow up, my son will marry your daughter, and that couple is kept until they are married, and then the day the bride is shown, that's the first time the guy sees his bride, whether he likes her or not. Now they will take the groom to the person's house and say, do you like? And when the groom says yes, then the arrangements are made. Prior to that, the family did everything. And so you married someone you did not know. And so you accept them for who they are. And then you get to love them in spite of their weakness. So there's never this notion of this royal prince in the shining armor, and after 5 months his armor is dull, and then he's not your Prince Charming anymore. In an arranged marriage, he becomes your Prince Charming.
Sure.
And this is it. It's shown in India, and then more, especially in communities that have arranged marriage, that the divorce rate is 0.1%.
But
It's a quick question. Is your marriage arranged?
Partly.
probably it's the Indian
Partly. Let's say partly. I said I couldn't say yes to Patricia unless my family.
No, but you knew her.
Yes, I knew
so,
her.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we can't call that an arranged marriage.
No, partly. I said partly because I had to seek permission of the parents, and my father. I couldn't go ask Patricia's hand in marriage until my father went and spoke to Patricia's family. Okay, and so that's and if we're disobedient, which means then we had to elope, and we would have brought dishonor to the family. So then, to a certain extent, while I knew Patricia, the marriage was arranged in the sense that it still had to go through the
right
process.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I'm still in love with Patricia. I tell Patricia, you know what, I love you more now than I did when I first saw you. And if we have to get divorced, I don't know what I'll do with myself. Because I don't know how to live without her. Because I grew to
Love her.
love her. Not that I don't know her, I knew her, but I grew to love her. Sorry, what's so funny? We're talking something very important.
Yeah, sorry, we're talking about how arranged marriages go, and we're like, maybe we should opt for arranged marriages.
Yeah, I mean, arranged, the West has a notion about arranged marriages. But the reality is it works because you can see the divorce rate.
It does work, yeah.
The divorce rate, and funny enough, it's shown that arranged marriages tend to be a lot more happier.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you see the person who they
are.
There's no camouflage.
It's true.
Yeah, and you kind of work through the kinks beforehand.
No. You work with the kings in your marriage.
No, but what I'm saying is, like with finances, you kind of on the same page.
Right.
Education on the same page.
Because you don't know the person, you have to lay down these.
Yeah.
You don't have any expectations, let's put it this way.
Yeah. And you know each other's stuff beforehand as well.
You don't.
In that sense, Prof, I think that the people who do the arrangement, I think they know the individuals well before
they know the family.
The family, They should know that this is a decent.
They know the family. And because they know the family, they know the cultural upbringing of the child.
And also the accountability is more as well. Because the families are involved. If you get divorced, it's a shame on the family.
On the family.
Yeah.
Right. And so the divorce is still a stigma.
Yeah.
Even if you abuse, you still remain. That doesn't exist because even if you abuse,
but abuse should be rare.
Abuse is rampant. I wouldn't say rare, but it is there.
In
I don't want to qualify it.
John MacArthur's got a number of that in his
But the thing is, in arranged marriage, women stick because they grow to love, and men stick because they grow to love. And so do not think about because you're arranged or extended that it is worse off than falling in love. Because as quick as you fall in love, you
fall out.
You fall out of love. And while might work in the West, what works in Africa and what works in Asia needs to be given the due respect. For example, in the Congolese community or in Angola, and I'm sure also in the DRC, in order for you got a daughter, right?
Yeah.
Now, tell me, how would you, if your daughter came and said, if the daughter said, Dad, I'm interested in this guy, what would be the process?
In terms of asking or in terms of welcoming them?
Yeah, from the moment he tells you to the time to get married.
I think I need just to find out where these guys is coming from.
Right? I mean, we all parents ought to do that.
The
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
I need to know the family and especially to know the guy. Why is the guy doing?
Right. And so once you check him out, you investigate. You know, this is a good guy. Comes out, is secure. What's the next step?
So the next step, we give them the date because the guys want to come and see us. So
Right.
you cannot talk to me until there's something that we call, my term, it's like prayer
Presentation.
lobola. So you need to give that.
Right.
first.
So why is the lobola given? Why is a bride price paid or dowry paid?
So mostly they charge you. So they
No. I'm asking why is it paid?
It's paid because
Financial
they
capability.
believe- The parents they believe they spend on their daughter,
Right.
and mostly they charge you based on two things: education. They look at the education capacity, and then also they look at if she's still, you understand?
Yeah. So that's based on how expensive then she is.
Yeah, another element to that is
No, I mean that's a faulty perspective, but it is a perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
according to the culture, it's just a way of knocking to the door.
Right.
And you give that. It's just a way of saying.
So again, your child can't say, Dad, I'm going to marry this person. There has to be a consultation with the family. The elders come together. They're going to negotiate the price of the child. Not that you're selling your daughter.
No.
But you're saying that my daughter's worth something, and I want you, by paying me this dowry, I'm securing a marriage.
And it's
I remember one of my sister, my father, what he did, and they asked them that, I just give example, give me $1,000. So that man give $1,000 and that divided in two. And he give them other 50%.
Right.
He said, no, take this one, I will take this.
Yeah. It's for the family, but with the perspective that if the divorce happens, then the person who paid the dowry can go back to it and say, I'll give mine.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, no.
No, but then,
They do that.
yes.
Once you get married, and especially if they are children, you don't get anything.
Because
Because the children are there. Now, once you take the daughter, in other words, you already sleep with her daughter, so we don't give you anything.
yeah.
So
but what I'm saying, but it secures the marriage. In some context, if the divorce takes place, you're going to pay back the dowry.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Some people demand
The dowry back because you divorced. I paid your son for the security of my daughter. Security not taking place, now pay back my dowry, pay back mine. So in some cultures, it is given as a form of stability to make sure the marriage is
collateral.
stable. Exactly.
What did you say?
Or
Collateral security.
payment. Or like in India, the dowry is paid so that the family can have a good start. The final is not given to the parents, given to the boy, and therefore with that money they can go start their own home. Whereas they're starting all by themselves, working 3-4 jobs already in the context where dowry is paid, there is a sense of stability. In the African context, it stabilizes the marriage. In the Indian context, in the Indian or Asian context, it says now you've got a good financial start.
But Prof, I think this thing was I don't know, that's my perspective, and see, it was better off those years. Because now,
Yes.
it's funny because
We're talking about the ideal.
yeah, people are asking cars, TVs.
Absolutely, because it's become, man is sinful, right?
Yeah.
And so greed comes in because of the West. And we see our daughters as commodities, and we see them as an opportunity of getting rich. Prior to that, it wasn't seen as an opportunity of getting rich, it was an opportunity of bringing about stability.
If I take, for example, Nikita here, I take her to Zambia, just an example.
You can get good money for her.
To get married,
you get good money.
I get
She's
good
fair,
money. Fair,
educated.
this fair, people, ministers will fight. Nikita, you better talk to me.
No, but in India, that's exactly now, the good system has become evil in the sense that boys are based on the skin color, the dowry is increased based on education, the dowry is increased based on whether they have a job, they increase, and based on the international experience, it just goes higher end.
International experience.
Yeah, work experience. It's got
Like-
international-
No. In my case, in my case, I was back home in Cameroon, so my husband was already there. So the family found me
Found
Yeah,
you.
so it was kind of like an arranged marriage.
Yes. Did you know your husband?
Yes, I didn't get to know him physically. So
No, but you knew of him.
Yes, I knew of him. So when I had to come this side, my family refused to take the dowry. They told his family, no, we can't take anything. Let her go and meet the guy. Let them kind of get to know themselves. Because my family also knew me, I'm kind of complicated, that this girl can run away, can just go and so we don't want to take your money, and the girl goes and sees.
So I don't want
yeah.
So they gave him a discount.
So when I came and we had we kind of got used to ourselves, and there was some stability, yeah. Then I gave the go ahead, you can go and do that. And it was
but the reality is that
But that one is very dangerous because that guy can just be clever. As soon as he consume everything, then he said, no.
Yeah.
Change my mind.
That's the problem. No. No, but Omer, you're quite right. That's what happens in South Africa.
Yes.
So they make partial payments. I can only, maybe you can correct me here, Ilani, that I can only marry my bride if I've made full payment of the dowry. I can have as many children with her, but she will not be my wife because I'm not paid full. And so these men get clever. They say, well, I don't have to pay fully because I know I can have many other wives. That's an abuse of a good system, but it's not the system. Okay? And so in the course of context, in the Zulu context, the person only my wife until the full dowry has been paid. As long as the dowry is not paid, that girl will stay with the mom.
So but are you selling the commodity? Is it like are you selling the person off?
No.
Because to us we believe that human beings are not for sale.
No, and it's never the intention to sell.
Yeah.
But it has become that.
Yeah.
Because of
That's the nature.
What it has become, not necessarily what it was meant to be. Yeah. So we can't throw the baby with the bathwater.
Definitely.
Okay? Every system has its bad and its
good.
And so, as missionaries or as gospel partners, we need to ask, how do we then enter into the spaces so that the gospel is not compromised, but at the same time, that our lack of understanding compromises entry into that space. That is what I said, if you want to learn someone's language, learn their culture. If you communicate the gospel effectively, know how to communicate, to who to communicate, and the context in which you communicate the gospel. Understand the roles people play in the community. The role of the chief, the role of the father. You win the chief, you win the entire community. You win the father, you win the entire family. Understand roles and use that creatively to do gospel ministry. If you just go in cold feet, you're going to have a problem thinking that West is best without proper understanding of the context and culture. You cause more hurt, demoralization to the community than the gospel does in terms of reconciliation.
So, it's really weird. But anyways,